The Nobel Prize-winning author Doris Lessing was born in Persia before her family moved to Zimbabwe, then known as the British colony of Southern Rhodesia. It was here that Doris spent her childhood.
It was, in fact, an elongated mud hut, long, very shabby. Snakes were not above wandering in and out, and the bush all around was unworked. No one had been in it excepting, of course, Africans, and that very little. What happened, of course, was that the government had recently thrown all the Africans off that part into reserves and given the land very cheaply to servicemen from the First World War. And that was a process referred to as opening up the country to civilization. And so I had this absolutely unique childhood, which I took completely for granted. My brother was over last year, and we were talking about it, that this extraordinary childhood wandering around in the bush by ourselves. I was alone most of the time.
Lessing felt constrained by colonial society from an early age. Her marriage at 19 to an officer in the government service did nothing to reconcile her to the prevailing order.
That colonial small-town life, and it was a white settler's life, was utterly intolerable. Sometimes I think, supposing I had never left, look, I mean, it's just supposing. Well, I can tell you what would have happened to me. I would have become an alcoholic within about 5 years, and I don't think I would have done anything very much else, because, you know, you could see all that going around. One.
Lessing gives a piercing description of Rhodesian colonial life in her novel A Proper Marriage. Like Lessing herself, the main character, Martha Quest, becomes increasingly alienated from her situation.
She was one of a set. She had been now for over a year. They were all married couples, and the wives were pregnant or intended to be soon, or had just had a baby. They all earned just so much a month, owned houses, which they would finish paying for in about 30 years' time. And in the houses was furniture bought on hire purchase, including refrigerators, washing machines, fine electric stoves. They all had cars, and kept between 2 and 5 servants, who cost them about £2 a month each.
One of my abiding images of Doris Lessing was of her sitting on the steps of her house when she'd just been told she's won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2007, with a shopping basket sort of sprawled on the steps, as if she'd been locked out of her own house, looking absolutely fed up, not because she'd won the prize, but at all the fuss around her, and wanted to just get on with getting inside, putting the stuff in the fridge, putting the stuff on the table. She got friends coming that afternoon or that evening, what it was, and so on and so forth. In other words, that the appurtenances, the embellishments of her reputation through winning prizes didn't matter quite as much as getting the shopping inside the house. And it was very like her, I thought. She was, in lesser times, she would be called an eccentric. She wasn't eccentric, she was unique. She became a communist, a very fierce communist. She was a feminist in the early days, and feminists rallied around her. She wrote a series of books about a woman called Martha Quest, which was loosely given the impulse from her own view of life and her own life as lived. Then there were the Golden Notebooks she wrote, which gathered a great audience in, and she gathered a huge reputation. But I found with Doris Lessing when I met her, and when we did a film with her, that there was that quality of slipperiness about her. I don't mean slyness, I don't mean evasiveness. It's unpinnability down, unpinned down ability. Claire Tomlin interviewed her. Claire Tomlin herself was an extremely fine writer. On literary subjects, she was the editor of New Statesman. It was a very fine interview, and to see the two of them together, again, was a treat and brought a great deal out of Doris Lessing from the rather stern tradition which Claire brings to it, and this looser but an equally rich tradition and that Doris Lessing brings out of it. So it went down very well.
I suppose the thing readers like to do is to assume that what you write as fiction is really autobiography. Has this been a problem for you? What is the relationship for you between the autobiographical element and the fictional in Martha Quest?
Well, I don't think you'll ever find a writer that doesn't sigh at this question, because to us, it's totally irrelevant, you know, because in a sense, everything has to be autobiographical.
Yes.
Of course. But on the other hand, you can also say that it isn't autobiographical at all, because as soon as you start writing about it, it changes into something else.
Lessing left Africa for England in 1949 and during the early 50s lived as a writer, a single parent and a committed member of the Communist Party. The Golden Notebook, published in 1962, drew on this experience to present a powerful analysis of personal and political attitudes of the time. Here the book's narrator, Anna Wolff, a writer who also works for the Communist Party, is having doubts about her commitment.
I read magazines and periodicals published in English in the communist countries, Russia, China, East Germany, etc., etc. And if there is a story or an article or a novel suitable for British conditions, I draw Jack's attention to it. Very little is suitable for British conditions. Most of the writing is flat, tame, optimistic, and on a curiously jolly note, even when dealing with war and suffering. It all comes out of the myth.
I think you describe Anna Wolff in The Golden Notebook as feeling that there's a conflict between her commitment to communism and to communist ideas of art, and her own feeling, which I imagine is yours, that art springs from very deep, private emotion. I wonder if you could say whether that was a problem you had in your writing.
No, I didn't at all. The thing, what I was describing was the problem of writers on the left who are always under pressure to write differently, according to some current blueprint or other. It goes on all the time. It's endemic in the left, this kind of bullying. And it, of course, is rooted in very deep ideological roots, which is why the left is, on the whole, very bad for art.
I think, writing about it later, you said that it was set very much among socialists and Marxists because you consider that the most interesting ideas were being moved around in those circles.
One of the reasons I wrote The Golden Notebook was this was 1958, 59, that kind of time. And it occurred to me we were coming to the end of something when I was writing that book, or wanted to write it. You know, it was, everything had changed in the Soviet Union, and so forth and so on. But I had been part for a long time, 15 years, of this kind of left-wing ferment. I mean, people come to you and say, you were part of such and such a thing, what was it like? And you start telling them facts and events, and you realize you're not saying anything at all because you can't get the atmosphere across, and that's what books do. Well, so I thought, right, I would like to write a book in which the flavor of certain left-wing circles was conveyed, the atmosphere.
What is it about the Golden Notebook that attracted you so much?
It was writing about women's lives in the 1960s in a way that nobody had been doing it at all. I mean, nobody had been talking about the struggles we had, about politics and marriages and second marriages and children and that kind of turmoil of life. And she was completely fearless in writing about women, about politics, about everything. And it was a sort of bravery that I so responded to.
I've noticed that since you wrote The Golden Notebook, which gives this picture of women living independently outside an ordinary pattern, earning their own livings, bringing up their own children, living without husbands, that, well, we've all noticed that increasing numbers of young women are living like this. I think you don't gloss over the difficulties and painfulness of trying to live like this. I wonder what you feel about the general movement of young women trying to live like this now.
Well, of course, I'm delighted. I think there are many different ways of bringing up children now, in fact, in this country. I don't know how long this is going to be allowed to go on, because I think there's signs everywhere of orthodoxy, of conventional thinking coming back. and I would be sorry to see. It's been a very interesting time to live through, hasn't it?
What do you fear might happen?
Well, I'm very disappointed in the left, as you might have gathered. I think great opportunities have been lost. The left at the moment are people who ban books in libraries. I don't want to hear all the arguments in favour because I think it's very dangerous what's happening. I don't think it'll be very long, or very little would have to change to have books being burnt on bonfires here. Very little indeed. It's all there. The unofficial committees are all there, waiting. And this scares me.
Doris Lessing expressed her fears for the future in her compelling fantasy novel Memoirs of a Survivor, which was made into a film starring Julie Christie in 1981.
They found the pram full of stones, they say. Poor little thing. Nothing else but stones.
You seem to be predicting a future of anarchy and barbarism outside.
Don't forget, you know, you're so much younger than I am, and you get things repeat themselves over and over again. One of the things that repeat themselves as you get older is phenomena that seem absolutely unending, strong, that cannot possibly be moved, just vanish overnight. Now, in my time, I have seen go the white regime in Rhodesia, which I assure you seemed at one point impossible. Stalin went. That didn't seem very probable at one time. Hitler went. If you lived through the war, you'll know that that didn't seem likely then. All kinds of apparently everlasting things have just disappeared. But what happens is, after you begin to see these mass movements arising and sweeping across your line of vision and going past and again and again and again, watching the angry and destructive hordes go past.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Which we are seeing now, of course, all over the world.
Yes.
Her opinions were often trenchant, or always trenchant. The left was bad for art, she said, at a time when the left seemed to be the carrying the banner, like Sister Anna, carrying the banner for art in many parts of Europe and in many parts of America. She was extremely interested in science fiction, seeing it as a way of exploring the intellectual side of our minds in a very serious way, at a time when science fiction is regarded as somehow way down the table, below the salt as a literary genre. She was criticized for her style being too loose sometimes, not as carved, not as styled. It's more open, much less neat than the style of many of her contemporaries. That, I think, is one of the things which will make her last and continue to bring in people because of its porousness.
Personal morality is also a theme of Doris Lessing's new novel, The Fifth Child. It's about what happens when a strange, violent, alien creature is born to a couple devoted to children and family life.
Happiness. A happy family. The Lovitts were a happy family. It was what they had chosen and what they deserved. Often when David and Harriet lay face to face, it seemed that doors in their breasts flew open, and what poured out was an intensity of relief, of thankfulness that still astonished them both. Patience for what seemed now such a very long time had not been easy after all. Outside this fortunate place, their family beat and battered the storms of the world.
I had been cooking up this book for a long time, and a lot of different ideas went into it. It's always easy to talk about the ideas that go into something, but what makes, what the engine is another matter. You don't always know. The first idea was, I'm fascinated by the little people, because every country in the world has legends of the little people. And I've got a feeling they probably existed. There are even some minute skeletons in America, which no one's explained yet. Anyway, so I've been thinking about that. And also, if you look at the world, you'll see there are little people, the Bushmen and the Pygmies and so on, are much shorter, let's say, than the Maasai, who are nearly 7 foot. There's already a 3-foot gap. But we don't think about that much. I think probably they existed. So this was tucked away in the back of my mind. And then there was a letter that I read in a newspaper, which is with me yet. It's the most awful letter. A woman wrote in an extremist saying something like this. She said she'd had several perfectly satisfactory, marvellous children, and then had given birth to this little girl. She used theological language. This little devil, this horrible little imp, who had ruined the family. She was born evil. She was born wicked and malicious and horrible. And the whole family suffered. And then she ended, at nights, I go in and I look at this innocent little face in the pillow, and I long simply to put my arms around her, because I never can when she's awake. And she said, I never can because I know that what will come up into my arms is this horrible little devil. Now, this suddenly all coagulated into the way books do.
Then something bad happened. Just after the school term began, Paul went into Ben's room by himself. Of all the children, he was the most fascinated by Ben. Dorothy and Alice, who were together in the kitchen, Harriet having gone off to take the older ones to school, heard screams. They ran upstairs to find that Paul had put his hand into Ben through the cot bars, and Ben had grabbed the hand and pulled Paul hard against the bars, bending the arm deliberately backwards. The two women freed Paul. They did not bother to scold Ben, who was crowing with pleasure and achievement.
For the reader, the effect of the incursion of an evil child, a cuckoo in the nest, a child who is evil before he's born, is like a great blow. Is there some element of parable in the fifth child?
You know that child isn't evil at all. He's just out of the right place. If he is, in fact, what I say is a gene that has come down through many centuries, all he is a different race of being that's landed up in our somewhat complex society. But what I got fascinated by in writing that book was how would we cope with it if it happened? And I got more and more fascinated because my first draft was much softer. And I thought at the end, my God, I'm cheating here. This isn't what it would be like at all. Because we don't notice things that we can't cope with. We decide not to see them, or we smooth them over.
But there seems to be no good way of coping with Ben in the book.
No, it isn't.
And Harriet, his mother, wishes to cope, wishes to do what the mother you described, who wrote the letter to the newspaper, she wishes to embrace him and love him. But there seems to be no way out, and this is why one thinks of him, even if you don't intend him to be evil, the effect he has all around him is evil, isn't it?
Well, he breaks everything up, but then he would have to because he comes from... You know, what's interesting to me, what interested me as I was writing it was that I don't see how Harriet could have behaved in any other way.
No.
And yet she destroyed her family.
And
this is a kind of a choice. It's not only Harriet who has this kind of choice. We have it all the time. We, if you're civilized people, let's use it with a certain amount of irony, then we're committed to certain things. And yet often the things that we are committed to have unfortunate effects that we don't foresee necessarily.
Undoubtedly, she's of lasting significance. She made an enormous impact on a whole generation of people, both in life and in literature. And she changed our lives. She changed the way we live. She was a very bold thinker, and she just didn't accept any preconceptions. And her thinking was original, always. Even when I thought she was wrong, it was original. She was never following anyone else's flag. And that made her very valuable because she saw things that other people didn't see, and she stated them. And I think that made her completely authentic voice and valuable for all time.
In your essays, Prisons We Choose to Live Inside, you seem to be much more optimistic. You seem to suggest that education and the social sciences and literature and history can all be used genuinely to improve life to change things?
Well, yes, I'm fairly optimistic. I think that we have all kinds of ways of looking at ourselves that could save us yet. I do, yes. I think that the ability to distance ourselves from our behavior and examine it, which is a new thing, actually, in the world, on the scale we can do it now, that's new and I think hopeful. I don't think 100 years ago nations were criticizing each other for brutal behavior. One can be cynical and say that they're only doing it to make a point, which is partly true, of course. But the idea that we can criticize each other for behaving brutally is a new and very promising thing, and there are a lot of things like that. And the fact that, given a chance, countries will choose democracy rather than dictators, which is happening everywhere in the world, is another hopeful thing. No, I'm not. But you know, you're expecting me to be too reasonable, I think. You can't be reasonable and being reasonable has got nothing to do with being a writer.